know, we're talking about one of the things that we need to talk about is the levels of social anxiety over depression and suicide now in COVID, and how we can help. We as a community can help. Make sense? Or is it too?
I feel like we had a little bit of that yesterday or last time.
Last time we did, yeah. Okay. How about this? Violence and its impact on culture.
Hey, love that.
Okay, we can do that.
Can we do that, guys?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're live.
Hey! Welcome to Donuts for Breakfast. We're extra bold, ground rough today, and extra glazed on Donuts for Breakfast. Unfiltered. Fair trade.
Fair trade. Yeah,
Thanks for joining us this morning. I am Rafiz, the Operations Director for Desire to Inspire Studios. To my right is our amazing videography director, Cesar Cruz.
Hey, everybody.
To our left is our Commander-in-Chief and all-around toddler in command. I don't know. He's amazing. Trevor Henley.
Toddler in command. Oh,
I like that.
And to
That's
my
very nice.
far left is the amazing Mr. Michael Pritchard. Join us today as we go off the cuff for, again, another episode of this month's Donuts for Breakfast.
All right.
Thank you for
So,
joining us.
Great
Nicely
job.
done,
That
Rob.
was
Yeah.
an awesome job.
Why have we been introing the whole time?
Yeah, I know. We
I
need
mean,
these two
Every time.
Next time,
stepping
Cesar.
up. Step up. So, just wanted to say that if you've been noticing, there's been an increase, an uptick in violence in cities, and sometimes even in rural areas, and the aggression with both gun violence and also in road rage and onboard planes with people. And, you know, what we want to get to is what are ways that we can think of as a community here locally and then regionally and then globally. What are ways that we can start stemming the tide of this aggression that seems to have taken over people, all races, colors, backgrounds, and cultures, because it's kind of amped up, it's amplified, I think, sometimes in media, sometimes on the internet. The name calling, the attacks, the bullying, the teasing, the shunning, the shaming, the hurting. And then people are taking that out the front door, into their car. 2,000-pound car becomes their weapon of choice. And, or, you know, as I have always pointed out, the thing about violence and violence prevention, which is where we want to be addressing this morning. What are you noticing in your community, all of us, with your own peers? What are the indicators that you're noticing in your own friends and families? I could certainly tell you the uptick in senior citizens anxious over violence in the community has made them retreat more to home and not go out as much in fear, because they're watching news stuff about these stories, and they're seeing the randomness of the shootings, at schools, in supermarkets, and we addressed that when we were in Colorado with our issues. But what are you noticing in your own community, Cesar?
Yeah, I think, well, part of the thing that concerns right now is that part of what the policies have kind of been installed that basically makes it so that people that are stealing basically things that are, under $1,000,
right,
they're not going to be fined or they're not going to be prosecuted. It kind of alleviates for some of these issues to happen.
Right.
And because people are going to act recklessly, they're going to think, oh, well, it's okay. I can just get through the system. And I think that's the problem overall, that we're installing these policies that are affecting our communities in different ways, because we're trying to help people through the system, but the system is broken. And the reality is that we need to figure out a way to actually rebuild this completely from the inside out.
And we can't just rely on the police to do the enforcement issue. We, as a culture, have to try and find ways to call people to account for that behavior, correct?
Yeah.
No matter where, what background, what culture, what language we speak, holding people accountable and helping them understand that if we break that down, the result could be chaotic for everyone. And as pointed out by my brilliant protege and colleague, Ra, only light can fight against this darkness and chaos, right? So, what do you think?
I think from a statistical point of view, you have to observe the environment in which this aggression is occurring,
Right.
first and foremost.
Yes.
You have culturally some very big factors for violence, for criminality, and post-COVID, those things have been exacerbated. You want to look at poverty,
Right.
and you want to look at mental health.
Right.
Those are two huge factors as far as
Twin
anticipating-
storms.
Yeah, as far as anticipating those things like aggression, things like violent crime, things like theft, and the likelihood that minor crimes will escalate.
Right.
Those things have those two factors have a huge play on how.
But some of it is just survival, correct?
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Poverty and mental illness. If we're all if those are the biggest factors, then at the tip of that, the hilt of that sword is survival. You know, if you're in an impoverished neighborhood, if your only way of getting a leg up, getting food on your plate, getting food on your kids' bellies, is doing it by any means necessary,
Right.
then any means necessary gets to be a pretty comfortable sword in your hand.
Wow.
And if you're dealing with mental illness, if you're struggling to stay connected to community because you don't have the resources that you need, you don't have somebody in your corner, then doing what you need to survive doesn't hold the same moral or ethical lines
Wow.
as they would if somebody had the same grounding of a community.
And throw into that weaponry that is advanced and has no what they call ghost guns. They're being sold into areas. These plastic guns that are manufactured on site in locations from 3D things with no traceable ability, and the ammo's coming. And what is that? That's gasoline on a fire that's already started, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it feels like people have gone to this point where they have they've been in isolation.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, the desperation of like trying to like make it happen by any means necessary has really like just pushed people over the edge. And then also on top of that, like the housing issue for most people that has kind of come to fruition of like people who are losing their homes left and right now.
Being evicted
And
now.
that causes a lot, like when you lose your home, that causes a lot of shock as a person.
it
so
shifts.
so there should be a lot of more safety nets that are there to support people in the way.
Who do you talk to about that, though? I mean, the politicians are saying, well, wherever the voters want, blah, 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 and the media's going, oh, they're covering the fact that the evictions are taking place. I saw them having sheriffs go to these different locations, and it was truly, heartbreaking to watch people,
Being ripped out of their homes.
right?
Well, I would say it comes to closing in within your communities, understanding like more about what HOAs can do
Yes.
together, especially if there's associations of different homes that can be there to alleviate families that are struggling with something.
Right.
Perhaps at the same time, like within the Latin culture, we have this thing called tanda, which is basically a saving system that everybody chips in a little bit every month, so that you have a savings plan basically set up for the long run, so that if something were to happen, you can count on that.
Why is it
savings
so
plan.
important to do in a community?
Because it's a great way to connect with your neighbors and also at the same time recognize that you're not alone and that hard times can happen and someone's going to be there to support you. And I think that's the other part too, is that we sort of live in this society where there's this automatic gratification towards like the things that we need to have on point most of the time. So this sort of mindset of like, I have to have the best of this, best of this, best of this. It's like, no, the reality is you just need something functional. And I think that's the other part too, of recognizing the things that can shift to those other biggest issues, because people don't recognize that they can start to learn to live within their means and avoid those bigger issues. But I mean, again, this is all part of that chain.
So, and then I'm going to move on to Trev.
No, I like listening to them.
I know, they're both very brilliant young people. And what I would say is that if we do not get into prevention with this issue, if we do not address this as a community with the prevention in mind, what arrives on the doorstep of all the people intended to make you follow the rules and do what you're told and comply with the money that is owed and we get you to, is sometimes a chaotic situation of an increase in crime, increase of homicide, increase in domestic violence, increase of bullying and abuse in our school systems, and a bullying attitude from bosses at work. And all of that is all wrong-headed. Am I correct?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm just.
But you guys are young. And I mean, you don't understand. Up on the top of the system is, I don't care.
Right.
Pay. Do as you're told. Comply. Be compliant. So,
Well, I mean, all I think it's gonna come to fruition is just that it's gonna have to change from me, and I get what I need and I want, to we, because I mean, if you evict a whole community, who's gonna move in?
Right.
And I don't know.
We have all this space, but we have no families, right? People know the price of everything, but the value of nothing.
Right.
And I think that's like a very heavy thing that most people are recognizing now, in order to understand what's important to avoid these biggest issues that are happening.
Exactly. But what's the impact to the emotional? Like for you guys, what's the impact to the people in your community, your friends, your peers, who are watching this happen, even if they're employed or unemployed right now? What is the impact to them emotionally, do you think? Any of you?
Well, hardships roll downhill. A hardship for somebody at the top might feel like a minor to, midland pain in the butt, but they can carry that down. They can pass that buck on.
Right.
And that bill gets bigger and bigger and bigger till it gets to the bottom of that ladder, the people who are holding that structure up, who are there to keep it in place, but aren't a part of enjoying the system, and they're the ones who are holding the weight of that bill, and that's where that anxiety is highest. That's where that frustration becomes aggression, because they're not just holding their anxiety and aggression, they're holding the anxiety and aggression that's been passed down through their lines, through the bullies, through the teachers, through their management.
You are very, very smart.
So the smile or the held back comment of who would move in. What was that?
Oh, that was gentrification looks really interesting from the other side of the fence.
Because, I mean, if you move out a certain community, who would move in?
The people who can afford to live there.
Right.
And by simple existence of the houses being empty, it fluctuates the system.
Right.
And the first person to move in sets the new value.
Right.
And the temperament of that community.
Right.
Temperament in what way, Rob?
So when I was little and I heard the term gentrification, it had one very specific meaning. It meant a crappy neighborhood was suddenly being transformed into a good neighborhood, a new neighborhood, a hip neighborhood, right? As an adult, I see that gentrification means pushing out the unsavories and moving in the people who have the money to pretty it up, rather than working with the people within the community to provide that continued culture.
Exclusive as opposed to inclusive.
Exactly. It looks different. Empty houses, right now, empty buildings and empty houses are an issue because there's so many and they're everywhere. But eventually, there will be a surplus of homes that only people with money can purchase. And then there will be a surplus of homes that people who have a little bit of money can purchase, but because they've been evicted, because they've been placed in situations where they don't have the funds to buy, those homes won't get purchased by that middle level.
Then the squatter aggression begins.
Right.
Then the rage of, you come and try and make me leave.
Yeah, disenfranchisement is a problem, and it's genderless, it's raceless. Disenfranchisement pushing somebody out of the place where they once felt safe, where they once felt connected, causes people to lose their anchor.
You are so smart. I wish that every law enforcement person could hear you speak, because when you're saying it, because you have emotional intelligence, and this is what we have to teach the community. There is no outcome to that is good to depriving people of a home, stability, mental health, employment. You know, that is in some ways just, even if it's just survivable, you can opt to feed your family, feed your kids, help your kids and family. But where we're headed is really important for us to understand that there are folks that don't get, they don't get where that violence rumble comes from, right? The riot is the voice of the unheard, Martin Luther King. Right?
That's true.
You know, Cesar Chavez said there's two forces in the world. The force that pushes people down, or the force that lifts people up. Choose. So why is it important for all of us to choose to do that latter thing where we rise people up? Because all the boats float in the high tide. So how do we do that right now to prevent the violence? In your estimation, you're smart young people. To me, what do you think?
I just feel like it's education and awareness that, yes, although it may help your pocketbook, you're doing it at someone else's expense.
And maybe your own eventually. Because
Right.
it could be your daughter, your
But not
son.
if it doesn't affect me now.
Well,
It doesn't matter.
Right.
It really doesn't matter. As long as it puts money in my pocketbook and I can go out and do something else,
Yes.
then
That
I don't
is-
really care about them.
I can distract myself from
Like-
That is
the
legit
sorrows and
management
suffering of
help.
others.
Yep.
With,
Right.
I can go take a cruise,
Right.
even in the time of COVID.
Right.
I could go on the golf
Well, because
course.
you can afford a cruise ship that's all on you on your own.
Right?
Right. And that's where, again, I mean, if you guys would know better because you're much more educated and intellectually smart than I am, but if you follow the history, right, it's going to come back full circle. Unless you've sheltered yourself so far away that nobody can reach you.
Yeah.
This is actually the term, literally. If you watch the movie with Charlie Hunnam called Nicholas Nickleby by Dickens, talking about in the 1850s. And if you saw Clint Eastwood's version of this, it was called The Hereafter. And it was a young Irish guy who arrives in San Francisco who's a psychic. And he's played by Matt Damon. And in the movie Hereafter, there's a person that has a neurological injury, a French journalist who at Phuket receives a severe brain injury and becomes epically wise in consciousness, and meets up with Matt Damon, and they're here in San Francisco, and they're tethered together in a way that Eastwood was trying to express to people, like, figure this out, folks. Figure this out before, you realize that 250,000 people lost their lives in Phuket in that tsunami. And it was an impactful event worldwide because so many folks were lost in the weather system. And yet, that was so long ago, we'd forgotten the impact of it until recently with what's going on now in the hurricanes. Right? So every one of these things we look away from to pretend like they're not happening is now reoccurring. This is the idea of a guy, you could like this or not, named Redfield, who did the Celestine prophecy way back when. And what he was saying is history will repeat itself until we get the lesson.
The lesson part,
Yeah.
I think, is really interesting about education.
I felt that spark. From
Primary
you.
education. No, because it's one of the things that we start to really dive into when kids are like 8, 9, 10, up through high school. we're given history lessons. We're given world history lessons. We're given U.S. history lessons, but we're never told why we're given the lessons. We're never told why. Never once in any curriculum is it explained that the purpose of knowing what happened before is so that we can learn from it and move forward, and the mistakes that we make aren't repeated. Right. Nobody says that to children, and that's critical thinking.
Right.
And
My history teacher did, but
did
that was his
he?
thing. Yeah, he was. But what's funny? I think I had an interesting take only because I had a teacher who actually focused on current events, and what they would do is to reframe what is happening now to what happened in the past.
In high school?
In high school, yeah. He's a unique guy. I mean, he's a pretty unique guy. His name is Mr. Petty.
awesome.
That's
in
a
high school.
college course.
Props to
Fred.
Mr. Petty.
Yeah.
I'm still confused between geography and history, so
Yeah, that's a thing.
that's a thing.
They are intertwined, though.
They are
But,
They're very
but
much
if you look at the history lessons, and now here's something you guys don't know. Redfield was a guy who worked with kids. He was just like you, and I'm saying this to you because I want you to listen carefully to how this is addressed to you. I love all three of you, and you're all three so brilliant you could write your own books. Redfield had theorems, and he was working with kids, and he sold 100,000 books on his own. He was a teacher down in Alabama, and he was like stunned and shocked that this was repeating itself. You can watch the Celestine Prophecy for free on YouTube, folks. It's free. You can watch his projection and the 9 ideas that he had. One of them was that everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. There's a reason for everything. And so this is where I'm heading with this, because once he sold $100,000, Warner Brothers Books went, this guy, a teacher, sold $100,000. What could we do with that same book? And he was on the bestsellers list for 157 weeks. Don't doubt your genius.
Okay.
Point taken?
Yeah.
All right. Because,
I was wondering where he was going with that.
well, sometimes,
yeah.
sometimes in the neurodiverse world, we get around to that string that we pull at the end so the puppets go, woo, wake up. So that was my favorite line. I always used to sing that to Robin Williams from Pinocchio. I got no strings to hold me down, to make me fret, to make me frown. There are no strings when I am free. There are no strings on me. Hi-ho the Mario. That's the only way to be. I want the world to know. Nothing worries me. So, in that consciousness, let go of fear. Yeah. And this is what we're talking about. Everybody fears, there won't be enough for me and my family, and ironically, they get to a point where they're all alone, like Ebenezer Scrooge and Dickens, and he has nothing and nobody to give it to when he goes. And he's waiting for the ghost of Marley to come up and beware the change you'll forge in life, Ebenezer Scrooge. So, if your whole thing is about making money, there's a line in Citizen Kane that is genius.
Let's take it back.
Nothing to making money if all you ever want to do is make money.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
See?
I think part of the issue I think they have now is the fact that we're in this age of information, but it feels more like the age of saturation, where there's an overflow of just consume, and so we've gone from makers to consumers in most aspects of our lives because we're glued to our phones. Our phones are geared to be addictive, right? I'm pretty sure you guys seen like The Social Dilemma. And I mean, again, that specific documentary focuses on like a very like kind of, I would say, secular like belief of like, oh, look, these guys are super evil, but the reality is like they didn't really know what they were making. They're human beings. At the end of the day, we're all human beings going through these experiences, but we have to understand that we have this ability to take time and slow down, and also recognize what our actions are doing.
Yeah.
So try to reflect at the end of your day what it is you've done that's helped someone. Try to reflect in your day of what you can actually improve in yourself, but also recognize what your goals can be. If you simply allow yourself to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this hour out, not watch TV, figure out what it is that I want to do. Because we know what we don't want, but we haven't figured out what we want yet.
That kind of mindfulness is essential, and it can start at 2.
pump the brakes.
Yeah. Well, it's the little things. I have a 9-year-old and I have a 3-year-old, and one of the things that I started practicing with my son when he was in preschool, and I've carried through, now my daughter's in preschool, is I ask them how their day was. But I don't ask them how their day was. I asked them what the hardest part of their day was. I asked them what the funniest part of their day was. I asked them what their greatest accomplishment for the day was. I asked them if someone did them a kindness, if they did someone a kindness today. It gives them a moment after their hectic child day to reflect. It creates a space for them for reflection, and it becomes habit.
A sanctuary.
Right? And as my son has gotten older, not only is there reflection, but there's intention. What do you hope to accomplish this week? What's your goal for school tomorrow? What's coming up on your weekend? Do you have any aspirations I see that you started drawing again. Do you have a goal? Do you have something in mind that you want to think about? It's creating a mindfulness and an intention, and you can start it so young. And I think to bring it all the way back, that part of the problem with the anxiety and the aggression that we see spiking, that we see escalating, is that people have been shoved into an untrained space of being present. We are hopefully at the tail end of a pandemic Lovato. We're coming out of a time of pause, where people have had moments to assess their actions, assess their attention, reflect on their mistakes, regrets, and aspirations that they may not have attained. And you have people who come out of that strengthened for it, more comfortable in their skin, understanding their own mental state better, having more a compassion for themselves. And then there are people who were forced to sit in the present for the first time. They couldn't use work as an excuse. They couldn't use social interaction as a diversion. And mindfulness, when you haven't had to sit inside your own brain, is a very scary echo chamber. So that anxiety, that aggression, all of those icky feelings that they had to sit with, manifest. That's that mental health side. You know what I mean? And if somebody who was working 4 jobs in an inner city environment to keep the lights on, has a moment to sit with all of what that means, because he's still working those 4 jobs to keep the lights on in the middle of a pandemic, still working all 4 jobs, because he's essential, right? But he can barely pay the bills. Sit in that echo chamber and then come out at peace.
So, brilliant wisdom, emotional intelligence, and teaching the folks on the tippy top to have the same sort of calm. We had 3 billionaires go into outer space. Are they escaping?
No, it's a money flex.
That's all it is.
It's a money flex.
I don't know if they really were in
it's
space.
pretty cool.
It was close to space,
but
it was right out almost in the stratosphere.
Right?
It was like just high flying the way I see it, honestly. But
Yeah.
Is it look at me?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Oh, for sure. It's a money flex.
Is it look what I did and accomplished in my life? You can do this too. Right?
I don't know about the "you could do this too"
I
part.
don't even think they considered that far.
Yeah, it's
Buy a lotto ticket.
those are the kids.
What's a lot of?
Well, I think what it is like people have to recognize what kind of legacy they're trying to build.
That
And
part.
what it is that we can kind of provide for our future, for our communities. Because at the end of the day, you're only in this life for a period of time, right? And it is small, but it's still time. So it's
But
still
it is eternity at
it's
the same
still
time.
quite a bit of time. You still have
Yeah.
quite a bit amount of time in your life.
Yeah.
That if you were to decide to actually do something impactful that can generate change for the world in a great way, you can do that. You can make that possible.
You want good words for that? Life is short, but it's awful wide.
Oh, I like that.
All
That's
yours.
perfect.
That spirit rolling, right? And so, as you see this, and you know, I feel sorry. I have to say, if people are saying, "Look at me, look what I've accomplished, look what I've done," and that's the sole intention, is self-aggrandizement, as opposed to planetary awareness, consciousness, mindfulness, helping the poor, the suffering, the folks that need you know, our attentions globally. I would just bring it back to one time I was in the middle of Central America, and I stopped and I took time to make help a baby that was from a poor family. And I got the folks to come, the doctors to come and help, and they took off in a helicopter with the father, who was just a working farmer. And he grabbed my hand and he was weeping because I was going, "No, you gotta get on the thing." And as it was flying away, the guy goes, "Man with me was a priest." He says, "How did that happen?" I go, "Well, that's the future president of Guatemala." And if we think like that, right? Because we never know whose life we're saving, whose life we're gifting and shifting and lifting. And that's why this work that we do is important. And that's why, in order to combat the violence and the chaos and the darkness and the aggression and the bullying and teasing and the greed that sits sometimes atop, to bring consciousness to them. And what do you say, all of three of you, I would like to hear from you. What do you say to the wealthy individuals that are indifferent? You know, there's a line by Elie Wiesel, and it was, no, wait.
Oh,
you're thinking.
I was thinking. The wheels were spinning.
Okay. Elie Wiesel said, "Hate is not the enemy of love. It is indifference. Looking the other way when you see suffering." And he had lived through the concentration camps, right? So how do we bring consciousness? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say to these wealthy folks to conscious them up, to make them, let us inflate their heart tissue? How do we inflate their heart tissue, their emotional intelligence? What do you say? On behalf of your people and all people.
I'd say that, you know, I think being able to recognize that your actions have a crazy effect on everyone else's lives, that is, if you were to actually visually see it, you can recognize the impact that you're having. And I think part of what we're trying to do in our lives is recognize that it's okay to not know like exactly the solution, but to listen. So you don't have to actually have the answers for people. You don't have to actually pick up the phone and have to like do all these things for people just because you have the power, right? It's a matter of empowering others to do the great work that they're able to do, support them, and recognize that they need time. So if you're like a boss and you've never addressed your workers and like actually just sat down with them and just had a meal, then I just don't think you're in the right place. And I don't think you're ever going to find that connection because you're not willing to recognize people as individuals. And I think at the end of the day, if you can see that, if you can recognize the people there to love you, that's going to be a huge thing.
If you can feel them.
Yeah, that's important. Recognize how you could feel, you know? And mindfulness plays a big part in it too. So it's the best way to recognize what's important, you know? And I think it even starts with just even your health. Start with your health, start with yourself, love yourself, understand who you are as a person, and then move on forward.
Good, man. Thank you. Good morning breakfast message this morning. What are you going to say? What do you say? What do you say to the indifferent? What do you say to the calculated indifference? You're a wise person. You got kids.
I do. I don't suffer fools, though, Michael.
I get it.
And
you don't have to.
It's
your voice.
It's foolishness.
Yes.
The lack of the intentional disconnect that people work hard to maintain.
Yes.
It's foolishness. I don't entertain that. But I would happily stand up and have a tough conversation, have a screaming match with the people who built our education system. I would happily have a screaming match with the individuals at the top in the social work system, in the foster care system. I would absolutely go to bat for our kids, because the people at the top right now, their days are really numbered.
Yes.
And nature abhors a vacuum. So whoever fills that vacuum should be compassionate, should be thoughtful, should be braggadocious and humble. They should be proud of who they are, and humble in how they got there, humble in the fact that they couldn't have done it without all of the people that supported them. And I think that we are lucky enough to be moving into a time period where what comes after is clearly better than what came before.
Great points. All great. Trevor?
I would say if you're fortunate enough to be one of those wealthy to that degree where indifference actually is a point in your life,
Yeah.
then one, congratulations on earning that amount of money to be able to get there. Fine. I would then move on to my message to anyone that's not wealthy and set the example, right? Coming together as a community, it's what's going to solve the violence. If I know that there's resources out there to help me eat, I won't have to go rob someone to eat. If I know that there's housing out there somewhere that I may not be able to afford, but someone will help me get, then I don't have to rob someone to try and pay rent or commit violence. I think that if we come together, and I didn't know about the creating a savings plan within the community. I think that if that was modeled everywhere, then when I have a hard day, my community has supported me. When I have a hard moment in my life, my community will support me. And knowing that when someone else in my community has a hard moment or a hard part of life, then our community will support them.
It's good to notice the love.
And I think that, because we're so much out there for the me, my first, I need this, if I don't get this, nothing else matters, is to a certain degree true, because you've got to be able to survive in order to thrive. But it's not about just me doing what I need to do in order to survive. It's bringing my whole community with me so that we all can thrive. Because if I win, you win.
Yeah.
If you win, I win. And that's,
That's a hard.
I
that's a
feel
hard
like
one for people sometimes.
that's how we're modeling how we act as Desire to Inspire Studios Foundation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's we are all in it to win it. We will all grow together or sink together, but I know sinking's not going to happen.
Well, if I'm on board.
Well, you'll just bring the bow up.
I was going to say, we'll stick you with one of the sides. It'll be fine.
But I mean, really, it's because our community will not let
Right.
the others go down so far to where if I'm lifing, my community will support me.
Right.
And I think that the message to the wealthy, again, is if you're indifferent, I don't know, figure your shit out. Maybe one day something will happen to you and then you'll realize how good you have it and how much more impact in the communities around you that you could have. But to the people that are affected by the indifference, let's get together and support each other first, because that's what's going to need to move forward so that I don't need to commit crimes and hate against my friends and family.
When the Titanic sank, there was a group of individuals that paid and bribed and extorted to have their own boat and not have to have so many people clinging. And they rowed far enough away and survived. But what they carried within them took their very lives, because it wasn't just guilt. It was a consciousness that they had chosen to separate. They chose to separate for self-importance or wealth or privilege or circumstances like that. And it took each and every one of their lives, without any doubt. All of them died in the saddest and sometimes loneliest way, where you wouldn't admit it.
Right.
because it's so denial laden. But I remember working in a hospice with a man that he said, I have everything that a human being could have except for love for my family and friends or even myself.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to have that consciousness. And I am grateful for all three of you and appreciate all the wisdom that you have shared this morning. And it blesses me. I tell you, you young people and the generation behind you, I think, are, as one of the kids said, the neurodiverse kids, I said, we have incarnating people that are going to save the planet. And he goes, that is simply a fact. And I was like, I love it. But
I agree.
yeah, all right.
Anything else? We're out of time. We're over time.
We're way over time.
But it is what it is, and we run the show, so we get to get a little bit extra time. What?
I did want to leave because I gotta have nuggets at the end.
Yes.
Yep.
One of the things that Trevor has always said, and it resonates, is we can do more together
So much more together.
than we could ever do on our own. And I encourage you, when you hear the words majority and minority, to think about that not as who is lesser or who is beneath, but think about who sits at the top of that pyramid. They are not the majority. They are the minority. We, the people, the ones who make their businesses run, the ones who make them their money, we are the majority. And we can be that change.
Think conscious.
Yeah.
Amen.
So,
All
is
right.
there anything else, or I know there's something boiling back there, isn't there?
I think part of our efforts in kind of taking back our community comes from literally trying to create consistency in your life. Try to find a constant state of hope, a constant state of smile, a constant state of something that cheers you, that gives you the ability to do good things in your life. I think we really want to reignite this sort of flame that we've kind of extinguished for quite a bit. And I think it's the time to do that now, and really just as a good time as ever to make it happen.
Amen. Again, amen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you so much for joining us for Donuts for Breakfast, where action meets compassion. And we will see you next Thursday at 9 o'clock when we'll be talking to Jameer, last name?
Oh, don't throw me under the bus
Reynolds?
like that.
Ha ha. We'll be talking to Jameer Reynolds, and we will have a really interesting conversation about the work that he's doing in our community. All right, you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good day. Smile.